the Sheriff podcast, baby. Yeah. It's the Sheriff, AHL Man of the Year. 500 pro fights in his career. Got the record for most ice fights in a season. You fought the Sheriff, lucky you still breathe. It's the Sheriff.
Welcome everybody to an exclusive edition of the Sheriff Podcast. Guys, tonight is December the 20th, 2022. Our Toronto Maple Leafs are playing their last year's first-round playoff opponent, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what more fitting to have a Toronto Maple Leaf legend with us tonight to chill out, chat, and just talk some good old life. That's what we have tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to announce him right now. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls all over the world, I would like to introduce to you my guest tonight. He hails from Ottawa, Ontario, at 6 feet, 180. He is a middleweight. He is the last player to lead the WHA in penalty minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Former first-round pick of the Vancouver Canucks, former member of the elite group, the Baby Bulls, first 50-goal scorer in Toronto Maple Leafs history, captain the historic Toronto Maple Leafs at the age of 22, inducted into the PEI Sports Hall of Fame in 2000. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the Rick Vaive. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good now after that introduction, I'll tell you that.
Well, Rick, you know what? I try to work on my intros, but it's true, man. I mean, we have a very special night tonight. You know, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Both teams are doing incredibly well in the standings, and it's really going to be like a message-sending game tonight for Toronto because I believe that they got out-muscled in the playoffs. I believe that was the reason why they didn't come out victorious.
Well, they got out-muscled, and they got out goaltender probably. I mean, Vasilevsky was unbelievable last year against Toronto, but they did get out, I think, hit. They didn't play quite as physical as Tampa, and I think that in the end was the reason they lost the series.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so I just think it's fitting. I think that the young guys really like to listen to the legends. So I think that when the guys on the Leafs tune into this show, that they're definitely going to take that to heart. So I appreciate that. So now, Rick, before we get going, I really wanted to kind of bring up my Gary Lehman story, which really kind of connects to you because it's when I first started hearing about you as a kid. So it'll just take a minute. So here I am. I'm 10 years old, just started watching the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Mr. Gary Lehman was in his season where he was going to score 50 goals. So all I'm hearing as a kid is these broadcasters saying, Gary Lehman is about to score the 50 goals. It has not been done since the great Rick Vaive has done it 3 times over. So as a kid, I keep hearing this, Rick Vaive, Rick Vaive, Rick Vaive. I'm like, who is this Rick Vaive? Who is this guy? I got to meet him. If he did this 3 times and they're just praising Mr. Lehman, I couldn't even imagine how great of a player this Rick Vaive is. I hope I get to meet him one day. And obviously I was able to do that. So
yeah,
I appreciate
absolutely.
that. But that's my little story of how I first started hearing about you. And the truth is, Rick, is I've been looking up to you for a very, very long time. And I appreciate you coming onto the show. And I really wanted the guests to kind of get to know you a little bit better. I wanted to talk about Ottawa a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up there. I moved away from Ottawa when my father worked for Dominion Bridge. And they were bringing a beam across one day with a crane, and it hit him in the head, knocked him out. He fell through his safety belt. I think he fell 40 feet. So he was in the hospital for a year and a half. I don't know how many surgeries. Couldn't work on steel anymore. So he started working for a company that made altimeters and other different things for aircraft. Well, they were opening a plant in Amherst, Nova Scotia. They knew my mother was from PEI. And they asked him if he'd go and run it, and he said, sure. So we moved to Amherst, Nova Scotia. A year and a half later, the plant shut down. So over to PEI we go. He started his own painting business, and he did very well with it. So, that's kind of how we went from Ottawa to PEI.
Yeah.
And in a quick, three and a half years?
Right on. But now, Mr. Vaive, you know that I can't let you off that easily, though, right? There's some important years in this little process here. So like Amherst, Nova Scotia. First off, I just want to point out that I find it incredible that such a small town in Canada could have such historical sports figures live there at some point, which your family did, right? And we got guys of the likes of Craig Martin, Bill Riley, Mark McFarland. We got guys that really represent that city through and through. And you, myself, and
I went and watched Bill Riley when he was playing for the Hammers Ramblers many times.
yeah, oh yeah.
When I was, 9, 10, 11 years old, and he was like the best player on the team.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, he's playing in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
What more would a kid want is to watch a guy play junior hockey and then move on to the NHL? It was unbelievable.
Yes. So now, the reason why I got this big smile on my face, Rick, is any player that I find out participated in the international Pee Wee Quebec tournament, I need to bring this up. And I know we got into this a little bit in our Zoom episode. I see the smile on your face, Mr. Buck. So now, my first question to you is, I believe that you were a little bit younger than the Pee Wee age. I think you were like 10, 11 years old. You did participate 2 times for Amherst, Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that.
I think the first time I was 9.
Wow.
And second
13
time,
is the normal age.
yeah, 12, 13,
12,
roughly.
13,
Yeah.
yes.
I made the Pee Wee team. They were called the Pee Wee Max, and I was kind of like, if you were a 11 or 12-year-old,
Yep.
you wanted to play for the Pee Wee Max.
Okay, so that was the team to be.
Oh yeah, that was the team to play for, and I fortunately was able to make it when I was 9.
Wow.
And it was funny because we were doing tag day where we were out, giving out tags and taking donations for minor hockey.
The fundraising, yeah.
And one of the kids that I was with said, "Why don't you try out for the Pee Wee team?" I said, "Yeah, but I'm only 9 years old." He goes, "So what?" So I asked my dad. He said, "No, why not?" So I tried out. I made it. I was shocked. I mean, at 9 years old, that I'm playing against 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds, and I'm holding my own. So, and then I got to go to Quebec Pee Wee tournament 2 years in a row. We lost our first game both times.
Yeah.
But they always had something planned where we'd play some exhibition games in and around Quebec City, and we'd be there for about a week. So that kind of worked out pretty good, even though we lost our first game both times, and both times in overtime.
In overtime, yes, I did read that.
Yeah.
I did read that.
Yeah, and Whitby was one of the teams one year, and I can't remember who the other one was. That was a long time ago, man.
It wasn't that long ago, buddy. You're still a young buck. But now, this is kind of what I wanted to get into. So now, the Quebec Pee Wee tournament, man, Rick, I can't believe you were 9 years old. Because even for the 12, 13-year-olds, you're entering a building that has 14, 15,000 people. I think it was about the same size the Coliseum as Maple Leaf Gardens, right? You got passionate fans that are actually interested in the game, that are looking at the programs, that are actually following these preteens. I find it incredible. That obviously was your first, like being able to see what the spotlight is like your first taste of the big stage.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. When you're 9 years old and you skate out on the ice and there's 13, 14,000 people sitting in the building, it's kind of intimidating, really, when you're that old. But you know what? I was kind of, I don't know. I think I was built different than a lot of kids. Like, it didn't bother me. It was really weird, but it didn't bother me at all that 14,000 people were watching me play hockey. And I don't know why, but I guess that's just the way I was built. And that's kind of how I was my whole career, really. People in the stands didn't bother me at all. Like, I just forgot about it, did my job, and didn't worry about it, didn't think about it. And I didn't even hear the fans during the game, except for there was one time I heard Dan Maloney benched me one night, and there was a guy up behind us. He said, "Hey, Rick," he said, "you're not busy." He said, you mind getting me a hot dog?" And, of course, Maple Leaf Gardens, how quiet it would get. So everybody in the building, I think, heard him. And I wanted to turn around so badly and say, "What do you want on it?" But I was afraid Danny was going to punch me in the head or something, so So I oh no, I better not say anything.
Right on. No, that's an incredible story. But like, I didn't want to interrupt you, but just to add to that, in the research and in our last show, we did talk about like your special ability to block things out, though, Rick.
Yeah.
Like you've had that ability since you were a young child. I think that asset is probably one of the biggest reasons why you had so much success at the top level.
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. Obviously, there was other things that I could do that would help, but I think the ability to block things out, I mean, I think that was my biggest asset when I was a player, was that I didn't hear much. I didn't even hear my teammates sometimes talking to me on the bench, and I would have to ask them what they said because I just had an ability to block things out.
Yeah.
When I went to Chicago in a trade, and then Mike Keenan came in and brought in a sports psychologist, and I'm talking to him one day, and we started talking about that, and I said, no, I'm fine. I said, I don't hear the fans or anything.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what about, when you go for a nap or something in the afternoon of the game? I said, I always visualize.
Oh, yeah, visualization.
I lay there, I visualize who I'm playing against that night, what defenseman is going to be on the left side, who's playing goal. I said, I do that every game before I play. And he couldn't believe it.
Well, you were manifesting before we even knew what manifesting was, Rick, right? You know, we're learning all these things in the last 10 years. And, you were doing that when you were, scoring 50 for Toronto, right? So that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know where that came from, to be honest with you. I really don't know, but...
You just got it, man. You got it.
I developed it, I guess, over the years. And it was, like I said, it was probably my biggest asset as a player, being able to block everything out and being able to visualize what was going to happen that night. And that night I would go out and I would score a goal, and I would go back to the bench and I'd sit there and I'd go, I saw that this afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I saw
you manifested
that goal this afternoon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so it was kind of freaky in a way.
Oh, yeah. Power of the mind, Rick.
But yeah, the mind is very powerful. And I think, these sports psychologists, if they can get that out of these players and have them be able to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're going to be able to be that much better.
Will add so much to the games.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. So now, Rick, the cool thing about these live shows is like, especially with guys where I've had them as guests before, like yourself, is I get to pick and choose what we get into, right? It's very exciting stuff. Now, I know the legendary years that you had in Sherbrooke, right? So, like that was incredible. But what I really, really am excited to get into is the baby bulls. Because check it out. Before I had the show with you last time, I believe I'm a hockey historian, and I didn't even know about the baby bulls, okay? So I'm just going to educate the listeners technically what it means, and then I would love for you to give your insight.
Okay.
So you were part of a contingent of young players in the same situation who were nicknamed the Baby Bulls, a group that included Michel Goulet, Craig Hartsburg, Keith Crowder, Gaston Grinjas, and Pat Ridgen, if I said all that correctly. Okay, so now because you guys,
Bob Ramage.
That's right, he was also a baby bull. So now because of that powerhouse of players, because the WHA was still alive and going, when the merger happened that summer,
we weren't getting in,
but you guys were all eligible for the draft, which made it one of the strongest drafts in NHL history. Do you agree with that?
I think it probably was, because that was the year they also let 19-year-olds get drafted.
Okay,
so you had 20-year-olds and you had 19-year-olds.
Okay.
So you had the likes of Ray Bork, who was 19. You had Ray, who was 19. And then you had all us guys who were 20. And, look at the first round. I think every single player, with the exception of one, played 500 or more games in the National Hockey League.
Oh, yeah.
And even guys in the second round. Mark Messier was drafted in the second round.
No
by
way.
the Oilers. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Strong draft.
And I think if you went up and down that draft and compared it to any other year, I don't think there was a better draft. I honestly don't think there was.
Well, I had to be safe and say one of the strongest, but I do believe that it was. You got massive.
And from
second round,
first to fourth round, talking. I don't think there's another draft where you can take 4 rounds and compare them to that year and how many guys played a lot of games in the National Hockey League. I don't think there's anyone that was even close.
I agree, buddy, and I appreciate you sharing that because coming from you, it means something.
And you know the funny thing about the Baby Bulls was 6 of us were going. So it was Keith Crowder, Rob Ramage, Craig Hartsburg, myself, Pat Riggin, and Gaston Gingras, who were all Eagleson clients at the time.
Oh, smokes. Holy smokes.
Michel Goulet came on his own. Michel Goulet was 18. We were 19.
Okay.
And after playing with him that year, I knew he was going to be a heck of a player.
Oh, yeah.
But in the deal where the merger took place, the Quebec Nordiques were getting Michel Goulet regardless.
Yeah.
So everybody was told, you can't have him, you can't take him.
Yeah.
And Quebec drafted, 20th, I think, or 21st, and they ended up getting him.
Okay, so this was a prearranged.
Absolutely.
Michel Goulet being from the region.
Yep.
Okay.
And played for the Ramparts
That's right.
in junior.
Wow, same arena.
So it was all, mapped out. And of course, our owner signed us all to 4-year contracts halfway through the year. I don't know if he knew the merger was going to happen or not,
Okay.
Mr. Bassett,
Yeah.
and signed us all. So he signed me to a 4-year, $200,000 a year contract.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in the merger, all WHA contracts were supposed to be honored. Well, but because we got drafted,
Okay.
they said, no, we're not going to honor those.
Yeah.
That's too much money.
Okay.
So anyway, we ended up getting a settlement. I don't know. I think it was 50,000 or something.
Okay.
Well, everybody got a different amount. I think mine was 50, and I got drafted by Vancouver and signed a contract with them.
Yeah. So the Vancouver Canucks, first round, 5th overall. Okay. So now that's a lot of pressure being a first rounder. But the thing that I was most impressed about is, obviously this is the same season as the trade, but Rick, you produced right off the hop. You produced right away. You did exactly what first rounders are supposed to do, which is produce. So now there becomes a time where there's a trade in this season. Okay. Now, the thing about you, Rick, is you are intertwined with some of the biggest characters that have ever come or left the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we got Dave Tiger Williams and Jerry Butler coming to Vancouver for the Rick Vaive, and I'm not sure if I say it right, but Bill Durlago?
Yep.
Durlago. Now, you and Durlago, you guys clicked pretty good, my man. This is your setup guy, right?
Well,
for most of
absolutely.
your goals.
Yeah.
How did that relationship start? He's, a year older than you?
He's a year older than me, so he was the 4th overall pick the year before, and then I came in and I was the 5th overall pick. Harry Neal, for some reason, well, he claims that I was out of shape at camp. He said he beat me in the 5-mile run that we had to do during training camp. I'm not even sure Harry could walk 5 miles back then, so let alone run 5 miles and beat me. And so anyway, and Billy was already in his doghouse. He got sent to the minors because he had blown his knee out the year before. And I guess he just had enough, and he's decided that he was going to move us. And I got to tell you, for Billy and I, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to us, was getting out of there. Because I was sitting in the press box.
Really? Even though you were getting those points?
Yeah.
Okay.
By February, I was sitting in the press box. I wasn't playing. And when that trade happened, I was very disappointed. I was, actually probably more pissed off than disappointed. Especially when Harry woke me up at 6 a.m. to tell me. But you know what? It was probably the best thing that ever happened to both of us. We came to Toronto, and there's a lot of funny things about that trade. So he tells us at 6 a.m. we got to catch I think it was a 1 o'clock flight to Toronto, stay in Toronto overnight, then fly the next day to Long Island and play with the Maple Leafs.
Wow.
So we get on the plane, and Billy goes, "You want to have a couple of beer?" And I said, "Yeah, whatever." And the pilot comes on and he says, "Welcome to Air Canada," whatever, yada, yada. And he said, "Today's election day, so we will not be serving alcohol on this flight." Well, I thought Billy was going to lose his mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at one point he offered the flight attendant $1,000 to service.
Okay.
And I'm sitting beside him and I go, Billy, come on. Like, we don't need a beer that bad. You're going to give her $1,000.
Yeah.
And so we flew in. And, of course, every press person in Toronto was at the airport waiting for us. So it's probably a good thing we didn't have any.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
sometimes it works out.
yeah, so we went to the hotel and we ordered, I think, a 6-pack and some food. We each had 3 beer and ate our food, went to bed. Next day, flew to Long Island, played that night. Scored 2 goals, so it was a pretty good start.
It's definitely a good start. Now, quick, while you're saying that, I thought of a couple of things. Quick question. So the hotel that the Leafs would use at that time, I know now that they use the Weston Harbor Castle a lot for the visiting teams. Do you remember what hotel you guys stayed at when you first got into town? Like who they were affiliated with?
Well, we stayed at a hotel right by the airport.
Okay, so airport hotel, yeah, that would make sense.
But then when we came back from the road trip, we ended up staying at the Westbury, which was right by Maple Leaf Garden.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we were there for probably about a month.
Okay.
And I moved in with Laurie Boschman, and Joel Quinville's brother was living with Laurie, and I moved in with them in an apartment in Mississauga.
Right.
Billy bought a home. Well, he lived in Tiger's home for a while. They switched homes, but then he eventually bought a home. And then that summer I got married and bought a home that summer. And then that was the start of my career in Toronto.
I hear you. And you know what? It's very, very exciting stuff. But what's even more exciting to me, Rick, is like, okay, so I'm going to imagine being 22 years old. Okay, so I'm 22 years old. It's probably my, second year pro, maybe third?
Third.
And my owner comes up to me without even giving me a heads up and says, "You're going to be my captain."
Mm-hmm.
And this is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah. That was
What kind of feeling was that?
Well, I mean, I was honored, really. I mean, the fact that he believed in me enough to say that. But I also was worried because I didn't know at 22 if I was going to be.
Right?
Yeah, there it is.
22 years old, number 22. We got this. I'm sorry, just we're mid-show here, but a signed Rick Vaive jersey, Toronto Maple Leafs, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, at 22, I didn't think I was ready for that job. And we had an older team at the time, and I kind of thought, but then on the other hand, I'm saying to myself, well, if I tell him no, he's going to trade me. I'm out of here.
That was his style, right?
Yeah, that was the way he was.
Yeah.
So I reluctantly took it. And fortunately, I had Boreas Salming sitting right beside me.
Wow.
Who was the biggest help to me the whole time that I was captain, especially at the beginning when we were an older team. If I said anything, he would get up and tell them to listen. And,
wow.
So I thanked him a lot for what he did for me and how he helped me, get around being a young captain. And,
wow.
He was a big part of it.
Wow. Well, God bless Boreas' soul, and prayers out to his family. Did you have a chance to?
By the way, we're going to Sweden in February for a Leaf alumni game.
Wow.
For the Boreas Salming Foundation. And I'm really looking forward to it. His family's going to be there and everything. And I haven't seen his family in a lot of years.
Okay.
And so I'm really excited about the trip.
Well, you just answered my question.
Matt Sundin is going to play with us.
Whoa.
Renberg, and then 4 or 5 other Swedish guys that played a cup of coffee with the Maple Leafs. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The game is actually going to be broadcast all across Sweden.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah.
I thought it was class act how the Toronto Maple Leaf organization honored Boreas before he passed. What great timing though, Rick, right? Like 2 weeks before he had that ceremony at the Scotiabank. And
I think everybody I talked to said that that was probably the happiest he's been in a long time. And, you know, since ALS was diagnosed and then it got worse and worse. And, you know, we know Mark Curtin's going through it. I've talked to Mark quite a bit. I mean, it's a terrible disease, and it affects you very, very quickly. And, I mean, I saw him last April at Scotiabank Arena here after that kid from Arizona broke my record.
You're coming for you, Austin.
Austin Matthews. He's a hell of a talent.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a problem with him breaking it. I had it for 40 years. It was time anyway. But I saw him, Boria. I thought it was Boria down in the seats. So I started walking down, and then all of a sudden he got up. We had a 45-minute conversation, and he looked fantastic like he always did. And then, you know, you look eight months later,
How
9 months
quickly.
later, and you know, he's no longer with us. It's sad, very, very sad.
It is very sad, and like I think of myself as a historian, and he did a lot for the game. I mean, he was probably the most recognizable player from Europe at one time. Would you say, Rick? Like at least Sweden for sure. Like when he came to the NHL,
Absolutely. And you know what I think? He was very, very instrumental in a lot of the other European guys coming over to play in the National Hockey League.
yes,
Because they saw what he went through, and he gutted it out, and he got through it, and, you know, made the Hall of Fame and everything else. And they followed, you know, and Matt Sundin would come over, and, you know, at that time there was, what was the guy's name? That came with him. I forget his name.
yeah, it was a long time
Another
ago.
Swedish kid.
Yeah.
And then you had Hedberg and Nielsen came over and played in the WHA.
Yeah.
Then they went to the Rangers. So he was the one that started the players coming over here.
Well, I mean, a cool fact is his influence is so great that, Rick, I think that right now, Sweden represents the NHL the most. They overtook Canada, I believe. I can double check it, but that just goes to show.
I'm sure it's pretty darn close. If they're not ahead, it's very, very close. Because there's a lot of Swedes in the National Hockey League.
Tons of them.
And I think a lot of that has to do with Boria starting that trek in. And think about it, that was like 1972, 73 that he came over.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, he paved the way, and I feel so. It's so cool that you're friends with this guy. You were teammates with him, and that he took care of you like that. It's a really cool story. I appreciate you sharing that.
He did. It was when I got there, they put me between Boria on my right, Ronnie Ellis on my left, and
Jeez,
it was funny because well, Ronnie was a born-again Christian. He never really talked about it unless you asked about it. And so at times I felt like I was in that cartoon with the devil on one shoulder and the angel on another one. And which way do I go? Which way do I go? And I went a little bit more towards Boria's side, unfortunately.
there you go.
Well, fortunately and unfortunately.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I appreciate you so much sharing it. So now, Rick, here's the thing, man. Like, I kind of want to kidnap you so I can talk to you all night, right? What I want to get in before we go, because I just realized how long we've been going. It's been so action-packed. But one thing I wanted to get into was a little bit about your family. I find it very interesting that you married a woman that you were able to play against her brother. Mm-hmm. Your first year, his last year, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool stuff. Okay.
You know what's even funnier?
Bob Stewart?
Bob Stewart. You know what's funny about that? My son was driving home in Cincinnati, and he always listens to Overdrive.
This is Justin.
Yeah. So he sends us a thing on our phones. He says, go to 40-minute 43, whatever, of the second hour.
Yeah.
And they were talking, and Hazy brought it up that, look at this guy. He's the all-time minus leader in the National Hockey League. Bob Stewart, the pride of Charlottetown, PA. And we're listening. My wife is cracking up. I'm cracking up. And I'm going, well, okay. So I've been trying to get a hold of those guys since then because I'd like to go on and explain to them that he's my brother-in-law. Yeah. And that he wasn't as bad as they think he was. He was on some bad teams. in Oakland, Cleveland. He was on some good teams in St. Louis, but he was kind of a stay-at-home defender. He only scored 10 goals his whole career.
Yeah.
He played 10 years. He had 10 goals.
Big, rugged defenseman, right?
Yeah. And he was a great guy. But the first time I played against him, he was in Pittsburgh that year. That was his last year, my first. We're in front of the net. We get tangled up, and I feel a stick come across in my leg, and then I turn around and my stick goes across his leg. Next thing I know, we're on the ground, and we got a hold of each other. And I look, and there's his face right there, and I go, "Oh, we can't do this."
Well,
so I kind of pushed him away, and I got up and I left.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you, buddy. I mean, you are a goal scorer, right? You don't have to do that all the time. But I mean, back then the NHL was a little bit different. You had the stars fighting and stuff as well, and everyone got involved. Now it's a little, people are very selective. So now, I mean,
thought it was pretty important that I did that, because I didn't want to get pushed around, and John Brophy was a big proponent of that for me. He said to me quite point blank, he said, if you don't stick up for yourself, they will run you out of the league.
Yes, yeah.
And I always remembered that. So I took pride in the fact that I wasn't going to get pushed around. And I told guys, I don't care if you beat me up. I don't care if you knock me out. But I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So you can do whatever the heck you want. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here in front of the net, gathering up rebounds and tips and scoring goals.
That's it. I love it. Yeah. That's definitely good. So now, Rick, the thing is man, I agree with you. I'm on the same page as you. Whenever I would see the goal scorers for my team mix it up, it meant so much. It meant something to everybody on the team. Yeah. If our leading goal scorer is willing to get his nose broken and go in the trenches, that means that everybody needs to do it.
Absolutely. I think you're right. And, when you see guys like that do it, I think one of the best things I ever saw was Jerome McGinley, and I forget who he fought.
Vincent Lecavalier.
Oh, it was, yes.
Yes.
And they went at it in the playoffs. And I thought, hey, I think this is great. It's great for the game. The game had changed a lot by then.
Yes.
But to see these two great players going at it, I thought, you know what? I love that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's great.
That's the way it used to be,
I mean, that's the way the game was played when I played. And I love it, and it was really, really great to see that.
So Rick, just before and I appreciate you sharing that as well. Just before we go out, I just wanted to point out, because you have a lot of fans, man. You got a lot of people that care about you, that are interested in you. I just kind of wanted to point out the 3 things that you taught me last episode about how you were able to focus and what meant most to you. You said how you felt, how your teammates felt, and how your coach felt. Mm-hmm. And anything other than that didn't matter except for your wife.
I mean, she always matters.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely,
Ricky?
Absolutely.
Right on, man. So I thought that was really incredible. That I didn't
give a damn what the fans thought, what the press thought. As long as my teammates, my coach, were happy, that's all that really mattered to me. And we didn't have a lot of success. I mean, the one thing that still kind of pisses me off to this day, though, is that they always say that the 80s was the worst decade in Maple Leaf history. Well, we made the playoffs 4 out of the 7 years I was there. We went to the second round. We went to the second round twice.
Yeah.
Okay, so that year, and Boria played that whole decade.
Yeah.
Wendell played half of it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all that bad.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with it at all. I'm on the same side as you. I think it was some of the most entertaining years. We got to see Mr. Rick Vaive play number 22 in blue and white. I think it was incredible. And Rick, honestly, it's so incredible that you came here tonight, buddy. I mean, I think everyone's probably mad that you're not at the arena because I'm keeping you here. Right?
No, well, I'm not going to the arena. I'm going on Thursday. I'm bringing my son and my grandson.
Right on.
And I'm really looking forward to it. I think he's going to have a blast, and of course he has a little 22 Vaive sweater so that he's going to wear. And,
wow!
And his last name's Vaive.
Yeah,
so,
hey.
So
it's a powerful name.
We're really looking forward to that, and I know it's Philadelphia, so it might not be quite the same as Tampa or whatever, but
a win's a win's a win.
you know what? It doesn't really matter. He's going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it, and my son's going to enjoy it. That's all that really matters.
Wow, well, that's incredible, and I want to thank you again for coming on the show, Ricky.
No problem, man.
It means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I want to thank the listeners for tuning into another episode of The Sheriff. We'll see you next time.
What up, Sheriff?